anyone on the call, if anyone on the call would like to ask a question as we go through this morning, please feel free to use the Q&A function as you do that. The Q&A function isn't visible to all attendees. It's just visible to the panelists. So if you want to ask a question, you can either ask it anonymously or with your name there. So it's really up to you. We're not going to be disclosing commercial confidence information, of course, but we'll have hopefully a pretty robust conversation. So if you want to ask a question, please go ahead. I might kick off by introducing myself, and then I'll introduce our fabulous panelists here. So I think just based on the names of the attendees that I can see with us this morning, there's a number of you that I do know already, but for those that don't, my name's Sue Howse. I guess I'm the founder and CEO of the Human Collaborative. Been in the independent consulting space now. This is year 5, but had a good 25 plus years working in the talent, HR, talent management, talent acquisition space. Spent 18 years in working with business to outsource large, complex workforce solutions, people, tech, process, both locally and globally, and had a great amount of fun doing that. And through that time, developed experience, and now I flip that into working with businesses directly to support them. And my small team, of which there's 5 of us, we're all elastic workers, which is interesting. I've always been a fan of work is what you do, not where you are. And outcomes versus inputs is pretty important, I think, for many of us. So that's a philosophy I've had for quite some time. The Elastic Workforce series, this is number 2 in our series. We ran a session last month with our good friends at Optus and worked through with them an overview of how we supported their contingent workforce model called Contractor Central. That was the first of our series, and this one today is taking a slightly different angle. We've got Rebecca from Inifin8care and Jon from Lycopodium, who are both in heads of HR or chief people officer roles within their respective organisations with a very strong lens towards talent. I'll introduce you to a little bit more in a moment. And my dear friend here, Zac, from Livehire, who we do quite a bit of work with. Livehire, I'll give an intro for you to Zac in a moment too. But the intentions of today is that I'll ask a number of questions to each of the panelists, and we'll have a pretty open conversation. Please definitely ask in the Q&A if there's anything you'd like to ask me or the group in general, or anyone in particular. We'll happily do that. So I'll start by introducing Rebecca. I like your hashtag. I was going to use that, Beck. We make aged care great. And that's been your mission, I think, since I've known you, which has been a couple of years now. But Rebecca, as I said, is head of people and strategy at Inifin8care, and I'll let Beck give an overview, but essentially spent numbers of years and decades in multi-industries, really with a key focus on people and outcomes via people, ensuring that culture, performance, engagement, and execution of strategy are at the cornerstone and the centre of all of that. Highly energetic, good fun. I love working with Beck, and it's always about what we can do now and where we can build for the future, which I think is really important. So I'll look forward to chatting with you, Beck, shortly.
Thanks, Sue.
Secondly, I'd like to introduce Jon, and I met Jon only last month. I feel like I've known you for longer now. We've had a few really good conversations around not only your background, but Lycopodium and the work that you're doing, and where you fit into the important world of Australia's economy, essentially, and the work that Lycopodium does. But your role of senior roles in the past with some of the really big brands in Australia from a consulting perspective, resources, gas, oil, mining, and finance and banking too. So I think between Beck and Jon and even myself, there's probably no industry that we haven't deep dived into through the last decade or more. And a really strong focus with Jon from a people and performance perspective. And I'll let you sort of give us the backstory on you and Lycopodium in a moment, if that's okay.
Thanks.
And then Zac, we've known each other for quite some time too. I've known Livehire and the business for quite a while, and it's interesting and delightful to see the journey that Livehire's gone on from being, I guess, started many years ago as a talent community or talent curator of talent communities through to I guess, full life cycle recruitment and into contingent workforce and over the next sort of, horizon of your development too, which is what businesses need. So that's our panel, guys. Hopefully I've introduced you suitably and so on. But Zac, I'm going to hand to you first, if you don't mind, to you have I call it the luxury of seeing many businesses on a regular basis, right? So the insights you get personally, but also from the company you work with is quite insightful. So do you want to just give us sort of a bit of an overlay of what's happening in the world and in the market at the moment from a people perspective?
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And I think maybe I'll start sort of with just saying how kind of cyclical the talent market is. I think when I first started with Livehire, sort of almost 5 years ago, we were in sort of a talent short market that was highly competitive. Candidates were in a pretty strong position. Wages were increasing, and talent teams were fighting kind of tooth and nail to source, attract, and retain quality talent. And then obviously COVID hit, and we saw things sort of swing the other way, and large quantities of redundancies and increase in redeployment and mobility. Some industries had significant talent shortages, and it was sort of a two-phase sort of economy that we were working within. And then I think we moved to the back end of 2021 when things started to open up, and early 2022, and the power swung back to candidates again. We saw, the Great Resignation, larger salaries, huge talent shortages across the board, largely due to lack of migration and increased turnover. So I think we find ourselves now in a macro position with, interest rate rises, a slowing economy, and power is now sort of shifting a little bit back to employees, and flexibility in hiring is pretty critical, or more critical than ever. Some of the data points that we typically like to look at is, particularly on the contingent and contractor side, we look at the US, right? So the US tends to be at the forefront in its use of kind of contingent workers. And that's heightened over the last couple of years. I saw a stat this morning that said that US paid job ads for contractors grew over 25% last year, whereas full-time roles grew only 6%. So there's an increased, I think, tendency, particularly in the US. We're starting to see a little bit more in Australia and New Zealand as well. And the US tends to be a few years ahead of us in terms of that maturity. But we are seeing double-digit increases in the growth of contract workers in Australia as well the last couple of years too. So your typical segments like consulting, banking, media, the telcos, transportation. So I think that aligns closely with the wider trends. And what we're seeing in our client base is trying to get a handle on all of that, right? So trying to get better total visibility across their organization. So regardless of maturity, our clients are looking at that total talent strategy. So maybe that means that all hiring goes through the talent or recruitment teams, but maybe it just means that they are trying to get their arms around what may previously have been a decentralized approach to contractor hiring or contingent hiring. So maybe they're bringing in an MSP to run a program, or they're actually putting everything through the internal talent team. So interesting from a client side. And I think probably from a candidate side, we're seeing, we've got about a third of the working population with Livehire profiles, which is a decent chunk of the working population. So it's over 4 million profiles. And interestingly, about 44% of those candidates would be open to working in a contract or contingent or a flexible working arrangement. So we're seeing not only that companies are looking to be more flexible in their hiring, but also candidates wanting or being more open to flexibility in their employment as well. So it's an interesting time.
Wow, I didn't know you had that many profiles. That's amazing. You get a pretty good lens on the workforce.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, not surprised by some of those numbers actually. So we'll probably refer back to that from a context perspective. I gave a brief intro, obviously, to Jon, but I'll hand to you if you want to give us a bit of an insight into Lycopodium, your journey, and what your key priorities or opportunities might be.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sue. So for those who don't know, Lycopodium's an ASX-listed engineering consulting business, established about 30 years ago. We're global, so we operate in Australia, South Africa, the Philippines, and Canada. We're about to also venture into Lima, Peru for the first time. So it's a growing business. We effectively have our business is 80% plus in the mineral resources space. So we typically are engineering and designing the fixed plants that are on mine sites for our clients. So our clients are the mining companies. And we're doing that all over the world. Australia and Africa are big areas for us, Southeast Asia, South America, etc. So in terms of growth, over the last 2.5 years since I've joined the business 2.5 years ago, we were effectively a business of about 500 globally, and we're now about 1,100. In terms of Perth head office, we were about 200, we're now 450. So there's been a lot of growth over that period of time. Now, there's a number of people within that total headcount that are contractors by nature, in and out of the business on various projects, or alternatively long-term contractors as well. So we sort of are able to sort of flex up and down according to the project activity and the demand in the workforce and from our clients. At the moment, there's just a massive amount of work going on in the market, and like most people, I guess, out in the Australian market in particular, there's a huge shortage of staff. But we've invested a lot over the last 2.5 years from a people and technology perspective. That were the two key themes for us. And there's been, you know, a lot of improvement and modernisation in that respect over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Good context. Beck, over to you. Can you give us a lens into Inifin8care, please?
Sure, absolutely. Interestingly enough, though, I could probably almost tell the same story as what Jon has just told, but in a human services business. So Inifin8care is a residential aged care provider. We have 17 facilities in South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. Business started just going on 7 years ago and has largely grown through acquisition, or we've done some greenfield growth. And in the last 3 years in particular, the workforce has grown from about 500 people to just on about 2,300 at the moment. Largely a part-time workforce, just because of the nature, I guess, of the types of services that our teams offer. The biggest cohort that we employ is what they call personal care workers, so Cert 3 individuals that provide that one-to-one direct care for residents in aged care, but also have a heavy reliance on registered nurses. So pre the pandemic, already forecasts of workforce shortages. Then you put the overlay of a Royal Commission, a large scale of reform that is occurring right across our sector, and then a whole heap of fatigue and burnout from dealing with, you know, closures of in and out of closures of facilities and what comes with that during a pandemic, and trying to make sure that our residents' safety is paramount through all of that. So all through that period, though, we've been trying to grow as an organisation. We have a mandate to grow. We are privately owned business, but we have a private equity group, I guess, that is a backer of ours, and they, you know, have a mandate at the moment. There's a lot of fragmentation that's existed in our sector, and so there's quite a bit of, you know, I guess, roll up occurring. On the workforce frontage, generally a fatigued workforce, large amount of shortages, and constantly having to work to develop new strategies. And I love the name of this series, Elastic, because that elastic stings when you stretch it too far and you let it go. But then you've got to keep stretching it to keep it pliable. So yeah, but yeah, really interesting. We're trying to really focus on our culture. We've had huge retention issues, just like everybody in our sector. So while that talent acquisition is really important, and we've been focusing on the development of tech for that, also, you know, retention at the moment is the key thing for us. So probably not dissimilar to Jon. There's just not enough people, you know, in the Australian market for what we need. So we've got to be coming up all the time with some blue sky thinking about what our talent acquisition strategies need to look like into the future.
Yeah. And I think I heard all three of you use interchangeable language there, like contractors or consultants,
Yeah.
right? If we think of the workforce, so in Infinite, we've got, you're all residential aged care. So for those that don't know, they're obviously facilities. Infinite doesn't do care in the home, but it's all in facility care. And I guess from your workforce, Jon, and geographically dispersed, right? I think you named 5 countries, Jon. And if you look at Rebecca, her role and remit is nationally across Australia with multi-sites everywhere, and the need for that workforce to be very remote. I think one of the challenges that I see companies trying to get their arms around is, how do we define this non-employee workforce segment? And there's probably about 4 or 5 categories, to be honest, but it is a real struggle for some. But maybe from your perspective, initially, Beck, you've got permanent employees, you've got part-time employees, you've got casual employees, you've got contractors and consultants, you've got labour hire. What have you seen? How have you progressed that in the last year or two, and what are your plans, do you think, to get your arms around that a bit more moving forward?
One thing I think is, and particularly during the pandemic, is that we're very reactive. And I think to sort of continue to grow and think through, you've got to be far more strategic, which means you've got, and to be proactive in that. In terms of those different angles, though, I think, and with the workforce shortages, is that nothing's off the table. And so once upon a time, we might have said, and, a lot of business, you don't want to have, as an example, as many contractors or agencies working with you because there's costs associated with that. It's really about knowing and having data all the time, which has become so much more important in terms of driving decisions. Having data available to know and understand where to get labour that's always cost effective, but finding those new channels. And so having really good relationships on all fronts, making sure, one of the things that for business relationships, but particularly for individuals from a talent perspective, is this real key about connectivity. So how do we as an organisation stay real? Money's not the only thing anymore that's really driving people. I think, during the pandemic, people have really considered what's going to get them out of bed in the morning to come to work, and particularly in a human services business, there's got to be that connectivity. And the important thing, I guess, in terms of the tech, which, Jon talked about them investing, we've had to invest. We were largely manual, but it's also about how we, how do we continue to become self-reliant? And so, the beauty of us of going to Livehire is really about how we're developing our own talent communities and our own talent pools over time, because that's going to enable us to continue to be more proactive as, our demand increases and so forth. Yeah.
And I think having that stuff clearer. I mean, you've obviously also been acquiring new centres or new facilities as well, and that comes with its opportunities and challenges as you migrate and integrate as well. So having that,
it sure has, because and culture just becomes so important in all of that overall, because we've having different facilities, and Jon's got the different countries, but you get fragmentation if you're not all aligned into a one cultured approach. We actually have a project that we've been running for the last 12 months, which is really about standardization, because we've had acquisitions, we've had greenfields, we've had all types of different ways that individuals are entering, and some not so happy either about how they are, and that actually impacts the communities that we're actually trying to recruit in, and has an impact on what our brand is and who wants to join. So that is particularly important culturally as well, that it's very positive, because otherwise we have attraction issues. Because our strategies have to be very localized, in particularly in the regional communities that we're operating in.
Often people that work in your facilities have friends or family members that are residents as well.
Correct.
So
that is
not
correct.
that they should be treated any better or differently, but it does add that extra layer, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And Jon, let's explore the workforce mix at Lycopodium a bit too. We had some good discussions around your need to find the skills and capability, and then how an individual works with Lycopodium can be different as well. Talk to us about how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia, we've got, give or take about 600, and about a good quarter of those are contractors. And, so we've got all the traditional kind of flexible work arrangements and those sorts of things. And the way we look at that model is effectively on an individual needs basis. It's not a one size fits all kind of approach. And in fact, a lot of our staff find that working collaboratively in an office location is best for them. But yeah, as I said, we look at it on an individual case by case basis. But in terms of then the way we go to market and the way we source people, and we're doing more and more direct sourcing at the moment through our own talent team using the 70,000 odd profiles that we've got in our talent community that we've built up over time. And that just allows us to directly source talent, and that talent can be salaried, permanent, full-time, part-time, fixed term, or contractor staff. And the way we look at that is we go by what there might be a preference in the business on that particular hire. But more often than not, it's a preference from the employee perspective and how they want to work and how they want to engage us. And so we're extremely open to that. To a certain extent, obviously our senior leadership, we want them to be, salaried employees. But for the large, portion of our workforce, we go by what they prefer. And some prefer the flexibility, the contracting nature, and that's fine. We've done a number of initiatives as well, as we spoke about, consolidating our contractor workforce into one payrolling entity, which has created a huge amount of efficiencies for us. But we're now getting to that stage where we're maturing a little bit more, and we're starting to do a lot more talent pooling, a lot more nurturing of talent, and being quite self-sufficient in sourcing candidates ourselves in a very, very tight market again. So
yeah, you described it to me as the one door in. Yeah, is that how you?
Yeah. And interestingly, look, I've spoken to a number of engineers and designers in the market that have done a mix of salaried and contracting roles in the past. And they've often explained that they're kind of, when they choose contracting, they're quite segmented in other employers. And we don't have that with us. You could walk around our organisation as an employee or a contractor and not know who the other person is, whether they're employee or contractor. Like we treat everybody the same. They've got access to all the same systems and benefits. It's one business. So one door in. Yeah.
And I think, we all know now these days that the barriers to entry for someone to be an independent consultant or run a consulting business or just be a solo flyer is fast. And we want that to be easy for them to contract with us as well. Part of that flexibility, scalability, getting access to key skills that you might not be able to get anywhere else, and making it easy. I think that's one of the hurdles that I see most, is companies falling over themselves. They don't have the infrastructure, even the contracts or the commercial terms set up in order that they can move fast with what they need. So I think that's your foundational stuff, I think, which is really, really critical. Cool. I'm going to give Zac a sort of lead in on that one as well. So as I said earlier, you see many businesses, and I do too, and I've never taken that for granted, the luxury of seeing so many businesses that I work with. But what are you seeing? Are there greater movement towards that one door approach, a talent lensed focus, or what are you seeing from your client base or customer base?
I think there's a lot of examples in our client base of doing that really well in terms of that kind of one front door, regardless of the work type. And so, whether that's managing all the types of hiring, all the sources of candidates, through Livehire, through whatever system they may be using, but that tends to lend itself to some impressive results. Things like reducing time and cost to hire, reducing reliance on job boards, small or reduced agency spend, improving mobility and probably generally making, their workforce composition more flexible. And I think that's probably the key is having the visibility of talent. And I think that's not just external talent, understanding who's applied previously, who made it through a recruitment process or what jobs they've applied for, but understanding their internal talent, understanding their contractors and contingent landscape in the business. I think that's so important in this, day and age to have that total workforce lens across everyone that you could potentially engage with.
Yeah, I had a client say to me about a year ago, didn't have a very good process and tech stack in place, said I've got a better chance to search LinkedIn to find who my people are than I have got searching my internal systems. What the heck do I do? That's of concern. And I think that when we did the Optus session last month, Kate Atkin, who's the VP of HR at Optus, her biggest pain point when I met her initially was, I just need to know who's in the building and who turns the lights on and off every single day. So I know what, that for executive is what, first and foremost, what they need to see. Before I move on to our next sort of questions areas, we've got a question in the Q&A from Tom. Hi, Tom. Tom and I have known each other for a long, long time. Nice to see you here today. Question for Jon specifically, having a mix of consultants and FTEs, what positive changes have you seen from a culture or comms or collaboration perspective? And has that been any changes because mostly they might be working remotely, or how does that affect you?
Yeah, good question. Look, I don't necessarily reflect and look at it from a, it's a positive change kind of aspect. I think for us, because we are largely working in the office, so most of our people aren't working remote hybrid. And we mix our staff with our contractors, and you don't know who's who. I can't really sort of reflect on whether there's been any kind of positive change with it, because it just works. And I think that the main thing that we do is that we don't have contractors sitting in a corner. We have them sitting everywhere, in amongst everybody. And our leaders, and maybe it's a cultural thing that's been happening for many years, but our leaders just know that we're all one business, and we all like to have the kind of, one Inifin8care and one Lycopodium and one this, but we are, and we don't see anybody as different. So I think the collaboration, the communication just works naturally, because we do have, leaders who know the focus in the business is on the client delivery and on the project work, and we get amongst it, and they all roll up their sleeves as well and get amongst the team, and therefore you don't see any kind of interactions negatively, at least from a contractor FTE perspective. It just works naturally, and I guess going back to my previous comment, where contractors in our business have explained that it is different in other organizations, and it is, I think, because they tend to sort of isolate them, and it's very either visible or it's known that that's a contractor over there, and these are our employees that we look after over here. We look after everybody the same. So you treat all the people the same.
One of the next lanes to inclusion, isn't it, really? Like, does it really matter what colour your lanyard is, or what colour your badge is, or what the status is,
Yeah.
I don't know, Beck, you've got a complex work environment there with people, shifts come at an hour's notice, right, from time to time, and
they can do, and that sort of has been probably an issue for us, like particularly when we look at agency staff. There's just been and continues to be a little bit too much distinction. But to Jon's point about building that one team approach, I guess we're doing some things at the moment to encourage that, because like the way that I put it to the team as a business, it doesn't really matter who is paying that person's wages. At the end of the day, we're actually the one that's paying them at the top of the tree, and so we're trying to do things to engage to build that. We're not quite there yet, but we've got, I guess, new mechanisms in place that we're putting in place, and that distinction is particularly with our agency staff, because continuity of our staffing for care is essential. And so we're looking at different strategies. As you said, Sue, they can get called in on an hour's notice, but how do we block book so that we get continuity, and how do we look at our workforce planning in a really different way?
And often there's local relationships that you'd heavily rely upon too, because
absolutely
that location-based demand that you have.
Absolutely.
And it is immediate demand from time to time, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Nice. Good question, Tom. Thanks. You headed us down a good dialogue there. I'm going to change tack a little bit, and we're going to talk about technology, not specifically. And if you want to talk about anyone in particular, feel free to. But I want to have this conversation because increasingly we know that companies are looking for tech solutions or tech stacks to help make what is a complex workforce scenario or scenarios less complex. But I also think that there's probably maturity now that I'm confident to see that most companies know that there's not a silver bullet and a one size fits all when it comes to technology. And I kind of differentiate between what is tech and what is tools. That's just Sue speak. It's not anything that's out there specifically, but your tech is your like your arteries, and the tools are your veins that take it out to the rest of the tech stack. But a tech stack and ecosystem is what's needed. So I might start with you this one, Beck, if that's okay. Talk to us about your journey and where you're at and where you're heading. You don't, as I said, you don't need to name anything in particular, but I know that you've got I can't see behind you today, but you've probably got a whiteboard with pictures on it and diagrams that sort of point towards the future. So what does that mean for you?
Well, I think probably 12 months ago, or even before when I'd met Sue, probably aghast that we were employing about 1,000 people a year, and it was all done on paper and spreadsheets. So it's been one of those things that our business hasn't invested on heavily until the last sort of 18 months. That's all changed though, which is fantastic and which I love. So we, I guess, had looked at that whole of, is there a product that can suit all of our needs, and most definitely we found that it couldn't. And I think to be dynamic and to make sure as well that our process is what I like to say authentic. We don't want to be the same as everybody else. How do we make it authentic? And I think that's how you end up building a tech stack that works for you, with sector specific requirements or your particular business requirements. So we've focused initially, I guess, and through the work that we did with the Human Collaborative to really define, I guess, what our priorities were based on our particular risks at the time, and also because of funding. And I think there's been a question on funding in aged care. We run always on the smell of an oily rag. A lot of businesses run like that now, but what could we do sort of to give us biggest bang for buck, and then how do we add to that? So we're constantly looking for solutions that we can integrate as we go, that give us flexibility into the future to grow, but also I guess some of our initial requirements, we focused on an ATS so that we were as well building our own talent communities, and Livehire has been one of those. But what's been really important to us for Livehire is how we can work in that strategic relationship to either have integrations with other products that we want to build into that sort of roadmap, how easily that can happen, and make sure that we're working together on that. So yeah, we're at a point now where we've got a couple of integrations. We're currently working on project with Zac and the team at Livehire, and we have additional HRIS and I guess video interviewing, which we're not doing now. We're looking at chatbots, all types of things into the future. But yeah, we're not in a position where we've been able to go, okay, we're going to spend, $1 million here and there. We've got to bite off little pieces and sort of do it over an extended period of time. But we're feeling really comfortable that we've got the foundations in place, I guess, to grow and to grow what that looks like for us. But we're definitely doing, I guess, best of breed at different points of our process.
Yeah, nice. And I think the key there too, that I guess we know quite close to where you're heading with that, is around integrating at a time when it's right, when we've worked out how the independent tools or tech can work independently well, and then join them up at the time that's right to do that.
And that's exactly what we're doing with something at the minute. And someone said the other day, oh, that's ridiculous. Why are you not integrating straight away? And it's like, well, because we want to get the business benefit for the team. Yes, we know that there are some issues with that, but we want to see it working well, just to your point, and work out, because there could be some overlay. And I guess if we don't know the tech that well at the particular time when we're integrating it, it buys buys us that time to do that and to work with each of the vendors more closely and strategically with them together as well. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I'll come to you in a sec, Jon, but I just want, while Beck's got the talking stick at the moment, there's a question, and maybe you can elaborate on a little bit, from Martin Ryan, who, hi Martin, I've known you for quite a while too, my friend, but around the EVP for, your candidate pools and strategies, and, what are you finding helpful? I think I know a couple of those things, and I'll give you a plug just brutally. Beck runs a podcast that was focused on engaging with their workforce internally, and now it's if you want to check it out, it's out for everyone to see. But you've done some pretty cool things when it comes to engaging with your workforce and using tech and different ways to talk to your workforce as well.
Yeah. So good question, Martin, because I think when we talk about aged care, everybody talks about the funding. And so not what this is about. I will bore you all to death if we talk about the funding and, with the insufficiencies of that. But I think if you look, obviously we've had some changes on that recently. So there's been fair value work claim, which I think, some people across. But aside from all of that, most people don't come into our sector and they don't really continue to work in the sector at all for money. So from, I guess, a lot of things, it's really about, as you said, how do you put a value proposition out that connects them? We're really focusing on connectivity and community. It's important for a lot of people in human services that are passionate about what they do, that they feel connected at an emotional level. We've just done our recent engagement survey and really focusing our leaders as well on approaching, I guess, their leadership styles slightly differently. We've had a very head-based engagement or leadership approach, and human services is needs to have a mixture of head and heart. So how are we working on the heart components of engagement? And so what we're trying to do is connect our EVP through with that. But a lot of that is about how we're influencing. We've had a campaign running as an example, We Make Aged Care Great. That was about changing the lens on what we wanted people to think of aged care and so forth, because as well as people feeling that connectivity, more often than not in aged care, they want some level of recognition that what they're doing is really quite noble and outstanding, and the media attention and the stories that have existed, unfortunately, hasn't really portrayed a lot of positivity about our sector. So we've really been focusing in our business on that and trying to change the lens on that. Now, how does that go to the core of EVP? I guess that drives how individuals feel valued and how they feel the organisation supporting them. Our lens at the moment for the next 12 months is really, while we've had a focus on wellbeing, we're really moving our attention now about what we're doing about mental health, burnout, etc., and strategies around that, because again, they're the things that when we say we care about our team, it's just words on paper unless we're demonstrating what are we actually doing, what are we actually committing to around reducing stress levels, reducing the burnout that a lot of people feeling in our business. So it's been very multi-pronged, but a real focus again on moving away from a lens that things are bad in aged care. They're not. They're wonderful. They're amazing. We've got miracles that are happening every day on the floor, and how can we share that? So that's sort of, I guess, I hope I've answered your question there, Martin.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Beck. Nice one. Let's take the chat back to tech again with Jon. I know that you've been on quite a journey over the last 12 to 18 months or more, and you're not stopped yet. So tell us about.
We're pausing.
Yeah,
we've done a bit too much in the last 12 or 18 months.
Yeah.
But no, look, you're right. And I guess I was thinking about it and saying, well, you can't start an HR tech question without mentioning someone else. And sorry for the plug of someone else, but Josh Burson, who's a bit of a global guru on HR tech, 5 years ago told us all that the market was shifting away from the one size fits all approach and was going down that best of breed or ecosystem kind of tech stack model. And it's taken a while for, I think, people to catch on, but certainly we caught on. And fortunately, when I started here, our CFO, head of IT, and MD were all on board with the kind of that sort of approach and that model. That they didn't want to be beholden to one system that basically they would struggle to get out of if they were beholden to one system that did everything. So yeah, we have a model where, fortunately, one of the not mentioning names, but one of the tier one HRIS systems in the market is very much of the Burson philosophy, and they allow their product to be bought in modules, and they allow deep integrations with it as well. So they're very open in relation to that, and that's who we went with. So we have a core HRIS system that pretty much just manages our core data, employee information. And then we have the Livehire system from a recruitment and talent perspective, and then other systems for performance, engagement, rewards, benefits, L&D, etc. So we basically bolt on to that. There's a few of those systems in there that have integrations with the HRIS, and there's others that don't require it. You know, in terms of the way we engage talent, I guess it's allowing us at the moment, as I said before, securing both contractor and staff through that one model, but also allows us to manage all of our agencies as well. And while we don't do huge numbers of placements through agencies, all of our agency applications and submissions are all managed by the same system. So it's kind of like a one-stop, you know, procurement talent place for us. And you know, personally, having known a lot of other, you know, one-stop shop kind of HRIS systems out in the market, they don't do that very well. They're not built and designed in that way. And so it's important to know the tech market and to know where you need to bolt on other products that can benefit your business.
So would you say now, Jon, you're at a point of good visibility of your workforce and who's where and what roles they're in and what functions they play, and you know, do you feel good about the visibility levels?
Absolutely, yeah, more than what we had been before, because previously 2.5 years ago we didn't have an HRIS system, so we were literally running off some payroll reports or some spreadsheets, etc. That would take days to produce. So yeah, the visibility is there now for us, but it's getting better and better as well. And you know, having both systems, HRIS and a talent tool that gives us both levels of visibility is even better.
Yeah, good. I'll lead into the next question with you, Jon, but Beck, similar flavour afterwards for you is the Elastic Workforce Series is aimed at showcasing a variety of different ways that companies are managing their candidate lifecycle, employee lifecycle, employee experience, and people experience. And I know that both Inifin8care and Lycopodium have internally run operating models, and there's definite reason and strategy for doing that within businesses. And we all know that some companies choose to outsource all or some of those requirements as well. And there's pros and cons for each of that. The questions around continuous improvement, really, and how you manage the feedback loop coming in. So set and forget, you can't do that, right? You've got today, and then you've got next month, and then you've got whether it's an acquisition or a new piece of work that opens up, that you've always got to be driving forward. So how do you, what's your feedback loop, and how do you make sure you stay current with how you're driving your roadmap and what innovations or continuous improvement plans you're putting in place, Jon?
Yeah, look, it's not rocket science. There's a number of different ways of doing it. You're listening to your leadership, you're listening to their requirements. You're constantly, you know, involved in relationships and conversations with them on a regular basis. But it also comes down to your own philosophy. And I've always had the view that if you're standing still, you're going to be behind the 8 ball very quickly. And, you know, I've unfortunately seen and experienced a number of employees in the past that, you know, we've got a bit complacent and sort of did the same thing each year for year on year on year, and all of a sudden 3 or 4 or 5 years passes, and you're a long way out from where the modern trends are. So you need to be consciously and constantly thinking about you know, what is coming next and what is happening, and what new tech is out there. And you need to do that through a variety of ways, talking to your vendors and talking to your stakeholders, and then talking to networks in the market and who you're your peers and colleagues are, and going to conferences and events and exploring and being open-minded to what else is out there, and not being so close-minded. You know, I'll tell a little story where I first came across Livehire and Mike Haywood, and it was back in the day where, you know, I was a bit complacent, and I was sitting there going, yeah, no, and you know, you'd get vendors and people harassing you all the time for meetings, and you're like, I'm too busy, I can't meet with you, etc. I do that a little bit now at the moment, but back in the day, like, you know, you take that one call, and you have that one meeting, and your whole world can change from there. Your whole philosophy, you know, the way you view things can change by that. So, you know, it's just important that you, every now and again, you need to get your head out of the sand, and, you know, do a little bit of exploration, and see what else is out there that is going to potentially address one of your key issues in the business.
Yeah, nice. And Beck, what about your thoughts? You're on a pretty decent trajectory of continuous improvement, and where the future goes for you.
I think it's, you know, which is not dissimilar to Jon. It's sort of always being open. I think it's also making sure that in our roles, you know, in the people roles, that we're really in tune with market trends that are happening. So, you know, reading forward and trying to, you know, have your own perspectives on what the future is going to bring in the next 12 months, 18 months, because, you know, you've got to be pivoting, I think, all the time. And to Jon's point again, is being really, really open, just to have that flexibility or elasticity, as we're talking about, to know and understand. I think that every day can actually be a new day sometimes, and with something new. Probably like Jon, I think there's so many vendors as well out there, or people that are trying to sell things. Like, I will go through periods where you just don't have the ability to deal with it all. And sometimes it's also overwhelming, because, you know, I'm one of those people, I look at everything and can get excited about every solution. And it's about pulling yourself back and going, well, hang on, where as well are the risks? Is there a problem that I've really got to be solving at the moment? And that continuous improvement is about, well, where's there a problem? Well, I shouldn't say a problem, sorry, but where can we get better efficiency or opportunity, I guess, that's going to deliver the biggest impact all the time. So for us, as an example, like in aged care, like speed to roster, as I call it, is the biggest thing. How can we continually be reducing the cycle of, you know, contact into the business? Most, you know, we're all the time about, unfortunately, having to fill shifts and so forth. So for me at the moment, as an example, that's the biggest focus. What tech can I find? What improvement can I reduce the cycle from, whether it's a week or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is in the category? Like, how can I drive the team to go, well, no, we're going to have a 24-hour benchmark. Oh, nobody does that. Well, okay, that's okay that nobody does it. That just means because we haven't worked out how to do it yet. So they're just as an example, but they're the types of things. But I think it's, you know, to Jon's point, I mean, we've all got, you know, duties, I guess, and obligations, particularly when you're in a role that's trying to be strategic, is really not just understanding as well, like the team that we might be leading in our functional. You've really got to understand really what the business as a whole needs to achieve to remain competitive all the time in its market, and be focused on the people front, on the, you know, on the talent acquisition front, about how do we lead and you know, align to what the strategy for the business as a whole is.
Yeah, good dialogue both there. Thank you. Zac, I'm going to ask you a question here, and you know, that the work that myself and my team do, you know, transcends not just technology selections, but talent strategies and workforce planning and talent operating models, insourcing and outsourcing, all those bits that go with it. But one of the things that I find vitally critical from a technology partner perspective is to support that that continuous improvement roadmap. And some of that might be a little bit abrasive or a little bit of rub with your clients from time to time as well. Talk about what you see as, I guess, the critical components of ensuring that you're always driving with your clients from a continuous improvement perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street, to be honest. I think there's the kind of wealth of experience that we can bring our clients in terms of how they're using the technology, you know. Whether that's before they sign a contract, right? Understanding, you know, to Beck's point, what's why do they need the technology? What problems are they addressing, or what are they looking to solve by having the technology? And also a key component of that is measuring the impact. I think that's what we're seeing the best organizations doing, is saying, well, what am I baselining, and what am I going to address and measure the impact of technology or whatever it is that change they may be doing. I think it's also a component of, it's not just technology too, it's process, it's people. I think that's where, yourself, Sue, and the Human Collaborative come into it as well, is there's a lot of change management on the back of tech transformation too. I think we like to work closely with our clients in mapping out, implementation, mapping out a phased approach to optimization of technology too. So whether that's at different points of a client's journey with us, understanding what the goalposts are, because the goalposts are going to continually change. To Beck and Jon's point, like our strategy and our objectives are changing, maybe daily, but monthly, certainly yearly. And so understanding what the objectives are that they want to get out of the technology and the process is key for us. And I think then probably on the other side of things, it's understanding from our product roadmap, based on client feedback and based on things like design labs or day in the life sessions, how our clients use our technology to drive us for continuous improvement too. So that, that's dictating what we're working on to continue to optimize the tech. Because, if we're standing still on our technology, then you're going to have other technologies that come past that. So understanding what's going to make the biggest difference for our clients, I think is key for our own continuous improvement, but then obviously feeding that information back to our clients as well.
And clients like next to each other too, like to ensure that we can learn from each other. Yeah, which is really important. I'm just doing a time check. We've only got it sort of 5 minutes or so to go, but I won't deep dive into any more detailed questions, because that we will run out of time. I know that. I'll do a wrap up in a sec, but any other thoughts, guys, either from either Beck or Jon to start with, and then I'll do a wrap up. And anything else to share? Any insights? Any nuggets?
I just, if I could just say, I mean, like, even I guess this panel, that one thing, in to Zac's point, and that is really the importance of some of those relationships that you build outside your business. They give insights. They can actually be, really challenge you as well, which I think is great. Like, I love working with people that challenge the status quo or what you think might be right, because that's how you end up getting the really best solutions. And I think as well about people being open and sharing, even in forums like this, is important, because, to the point, I think Jon had said, if you attend something and you just have that, that sparked thought that can lead you to a realization, quite often, that it'll be a random conversation that goes away. So I'm always extremely appreciative and put a lot of value into those strategic relationships. I think they're really, really important for businesses to grow and to improve. So
yeah, and probably the final point that I'd make, Sue, would be conversely to that is around just being mindful that everything you should be doing, or from my perspective anyway, in our business, is all around the employee and their experience. So everything from we talked about earlier, which was allowing our employees or our candidates coming into our business or through that one door, multiple options on what they prefer to do and how they prefer to work and what their individual circumstances are, and treating everybody equally. And giving them all the same sort of benefits and systems and accesses that everybody gets. It's the same thing that we go through, the same process we go through when we're looking at technology in our tech stack, and what we're analysing, assessing in the marketplace. Is it's got to drive a positive experience. It's got to be intuitive. It's got to be easy to use. The 5 or 6 systems that we've rolled out in the last sort of 6 or so months have all been systems that have required very little change management, barely any kind of manuals or instructions on how to use it. You should just be able to click into things these days and just intuitively be able to navigate and use things. And that's super critical, when you're going down that kind of strategy, and you're needing to build out tech fast. Anything complicated, it's just a struggle. So it's all about that experience that employees are going to get and how it's going to benefit them and make them more productive and efficient and effective in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about, 10 years from now, the digital natives that are going to be in every workforce, right? That is how they function, how they expect to function, and want that experience and expect that experience as well. Yeah. Guys, I have loved this chat today. Thank you. Zac, have you got anything, any nuggets or words of wisdom before I do my wrap up?
Oh, I don't think so. I think, to your point, you from a technology standpoint, which selfishly is is my lens, right? Is you have to prepare for what you need in 3 to 5 years' time, not just the present. I think the key to being able to measure the impact of that is what's going to get talent teams the investment to be able to buy, and also continue to gain the trust and secure future investment too, as you do build out your tech stack and integrate and make the whole process more streamlined. So I think that's the key to it, is being able to measure.
Excellent. Well, I've enjoyed today's discussion. Hour always goes really fast. So thank you for those that joined us. You've gotten some little nuggets of information. I know that in my conversations with Jon and Rebecca leading up to today, they'd welcome any reach outs directly if you want any thoughts or discussion. And as we've all sort of said now too, the power of network is pretty good. So, I've always been a fan of the network effect. 1 + 1 can equal 3, 5, or 10, depending upon where you take that network. So that's my call out for today. And I just want to thank everyone for joining. We've got another session planned for October. We'll pop a newsletter out with a follow-up with a link to today's recording as well. So on that note, I would like to thank Jon, Rebecca, and Zac, and all of our lovely attendees. Thanks for your questions. And wherever you are in the country or the world, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and take care. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.